بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وأحسن الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So inshallah we'll continue from where we left off last week. We stopped at this hadith here. Just a quick recap. The Shaykh was talking about or going over the chapter regarding the tongue and the major sins with regard to the tongue. So we arrived at this and we stopped here at this hadith, and we'll continue from here inshallah from point 24. So the Shaykh says وَلَهُمَا عَنْ سَهْلِ بْنُ سَعْدٍ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمَا مَرْفُوعًا من يضمن لي ما بين لحييه وما بين رجليه أضمن له الجنة. And this hadith is authenticated, and it was mentioned on the authority of Sahl ibn Sa'd, may Allah be pleased with him, directly related from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever guarantees me what's between their jaws or between their beard, or in another narration it's between their jaws, so we'll just take that. So what's between their jaws, i.e. their tongue, and what's between their legs, i.e. their private parts, I will guarantee for them paradise. And the Shaykh inshallah will explain this as we go through. So let's read through the explanation of the hadith to gain more benefit from it. The Shaykh, he says, أورد هذا الحديث في الصحيحين عن سهل رضي الله عنه مرفوعا قال من يضمن لي ما بين لحييه وما بين رجليه أضمن له الجنة. من يضمن لي ما بين لحييه أي اللسان وما بين رجليه أي الفرج. وهذا الحديث فيه دعوة لصيانة اللسان وصيانة الفرج، وأن من صانهما فقد ضمن له النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام الجنة. انظر هذا الضمان العظيم، أضمن له الجنة. الضامن من هو؟ الرسول عليه الصلاة والسلام. والأمور التي ينال بها هذا الضمان أمران: حفظ اللسان وحفظ الفرج. والشيء المضمون ما هو؟ دخول الجنة بحفظ هذين العضوين من الإنسان لسانه وفرجه. يحفظ لسانه عن الحرام ويحفظ فرجه عن الفاحشة. So then in this paragraph the Shaykh, he begins explaining the hadith that we read, and the Shaykh, he says in this hadith what was reported, and this is mentioned in both Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih al-Muslim regarding this hadith, where the Sahabi Sahal mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever guarantees me what's between their jaws and what's between their legs, I guarantee for them paradise. And the Shaykh says, what does between the jaws mean? It means is referring to the tongue. The reference is to the tongue, and the reference to what's between the legs is to do with the private parts. And the Shaykh says that in this hadith there is a call to preserving the tongue and the private parts, and whoever preserves them, then indeed and without a doubt the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has guaranteed for them paradise. And the Shaykh says, look at this great guarantee, what's being guaranteed. that Jannah is being guaranteed, and who is the guarantor, or who is the one guaranteeing this? It's the Prophet and the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the affairs, or those things which this guarantee is obtained, what are they? The Shaykh says it's two things. The first is preserving the tongue, and the second one is preserving the private parts. And what is the guarantee? Like, what's at the end of it? The end of it is, if you fulfill these two things, then at the end of it is paradise. You are granted paradise. That's the ultimate reward. So then the Shaykh, he goes on to say, so whoever preserves these two things that are mentioned in the hadith from the person, i.e. his tongue and his private parts, so meaning that the Shaykh adds some extra information here. He says, meaning that the person stays away from mentioning haram on his tongue, anything that's forbidden upon his tongue, and staying away from those acts, for example fornication and other acts with regards to the private parts. So anybody who preserves themselves from these, or preserve themselves, then is guaranteed Jannah. And the Shaykh, he carries on, he says, if we go on to point 25, قال رحمه الله تعالى وعن سفيان بن عبد الله رضي الله عنه قال قلت يا رسول الله ما أخوف ما تخاف عليه فأخذ بلسان نفسه ثم قال كف عليك هذا قال الترمذي حسن صحيح. So in the next hadith, the Shaykh mentions, it's on the authority of Sufyan ibn Abdullah, may Allah be pleased with him, where he asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, I said, O Messenger of Allah, what is the most fearful thing that you fear upon me, or for me? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam took his tongue, and he pointed at his tongue, or took his tongue, and he said this, and he said, Kufa alayka hada, so keep hold of this, keep it under control. And so this is Sahih Hadith Hasan. The Shaykh will explain this, so let's go through it. Let's get more benefits from the Shaykh's explanation. He goes on to say, قال وعن سفيان بن عبد الله رضي الله عنه قال قلت يا رسول الله ما أخوف ما تخاف علي ما هو أكثر شيء تخاف علي منه ما أخوف ما تخاف علي. وهذا السؤال من هذا الصحابي الجليل رضي الله عنه وارضاه يدل على إذم حرص الصحابة رضي الله عنهم على السلامة والعافية من الشرور. So then in this first short paragraph here, the Shaykh mentions the hadith again, and he clarifies that what's being asked is, the Sahabi asked the Prophet ﷺ, what thing do you fear from me most? From what are those things that you fear from me most? And the Shaykh says that this question from this great Sahabi companion, may Allah be pleased with him, it demonstrates and shows us the greatness of their striving, their great striving, the Sahabas, how the companions, how they strove, may Allah be pleased with them all, in terms of making sure that they are secure and safe in their deen, and staying away from evil. So then the Shaykh goes on and he continues, he says, ما أخوف ما تخاف عليه انتبه هنا الصحابة رضي الله عنهم كانت أسئلتهم كما أنهم يسألون عن الخير وأعمال الخير، أي العمل أفضل، أي العمل أحب إلى الله، كما أنهم يسألون عن ذلك أيضا يسألون في الوقت نفسه على الأشياء التي تجتنب ويخشى منها. فهذا الآن الصحابي رضي الله عنه يقول ما أخوف ما تخاف عليه. حذيفة رضي الله عنه يقول كان أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يسألونه عن الخير وكنت أسأله عن الشر. الآن هذا الصحابي كان يسأل عن الشر ما أخوف ما تخاف عليه، وكنت أسأله عن الشر مخافة أن يدركني. وهذا يفيدنا أن المسلم كما أنه مطلوب منه أن يعرف الخير ليعمل به، فإنه مطلوب منه أن يعرف الشر ليجتنبه. So then in this paragraph the Shaykh makes some important points here. He says, pay attention here. He says that the companions, may Allah be pleased with them, they used to ask, generally speaking, they used to ask the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about good, about all questions related to good, all that which is good, and actions that are good, etc. Like what's better to do, etc. What are those actions that are most beloved to Allah, etc. And they used to ask that. Also, they used to ask at the same time and on things to avoid, and things that they feared from as well, and to avoid. And this is what the Shaykh says here. And so then the Shaykh mentions the part of the hadith that we're talking about where the Sahabi asked, where Sufyan ibn Abdullah asked the Prophet ﷺ regarding what do you fear from me most? And Hudhayfa radiallahu anhu, though the companion Hudhayfa, as we'll be aware, Hudhayfa, may Allah be pleased with him, he said that the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, used to ask the Prophet about good, and I used to ask him about evil. And then the Shaykh says, now this Sahabi, he was asking, Hudhayfa was asking about the evil, like the evils, to avoid them, obviously, so we know them. Why? And then that answer, the Shaykh answers it here. I already mentioned it, but we'll go over it as we go reading through. He used to ask about the evil so he could avoid it and prevent it from reaching him, to avoid it. And so this is how we learn about good as well as what's out there in terms of evil, so we don't fall into the trap or fall into errors, and staying away from these kind of things. Without knowledge of them, we wouldn't know, and if you fall into them and find out afterwards, it's not a good place to be in. And the Shaykh says here that this benefits the Muslim. Like what's sought from the Muslim to know about and learn about what's good and act upon that which is good, likewise it's upon the Muslim to know what is evil so he can avoid it. Let's carry on. The Shaykh says, وأيضا هذا الحديث يفيدنا أن عقد هذه الترجمة التي عقدها المصنف رحمه الله بعنوان باب التحذير من الشر أمر مطلوب، وكان الصحابة رضي الله عنهم وأرضاهم يسألون النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عنه، قال ما أخوف ما تخاف عليه، ما هو أشد شيء تخاف عليه منه. And the Shaykh mentions here also, he says that in this hadith, what also benefits us, we can benefit as well, and what benefits us is that in this explanation and of the original author of this book of Major Sins, that the author has also he's put a chapter in this book covering the warning from evil as well. So going back to the earlier point, that we need to know what the evils are so we can avoid them. The Shaykh goes on to say, as we move on to the next paragraph, inshallah, قال فأخذ بلسان نفسه ثم قال كف عليك هذا، أي احذر من شر اللسان، وإذا وفق العبد لكف اللسان عن الشر، لأن قوله كف عليك هذا أي كفه عن الشر لا عن الخير، كف عليك هذا أي كفه عن الشر وعن كل ما حرمه الله سبحانه وتعالى. فإذا كف الإنسان لسانه عن الشر كفت الجوارح عن الشر تبعا له، كما سيأتي معنا في الحديث. فإن الأعضاء كلها تكفر اللسان فتقول اتق الله فينا فإنما نحن بك فإن استقمت استقمنا وإن اعوججت اعوججنا فإذا اعوج اللسان اعوجت الجوارح وإذا كف اللسان كما في هذا الحديث كف عليك هذا كفة الجوارح تبعا للسان. ولهذا قال بعض السلف ليس هناك شيء يعني من أعمال الإنسان إذا فعله العبد تبعته الجوارح إلا اللسان لا يرى أحد صان لسانه إلا وصلحت أعماله كلها. So then the Shaykh says in this paragraph, he says, and he continues with regards to the hadith that we were translating here, that the Shaykh says, فَأَخَذَ بِلِسَانِ نَفْسِهِ ثُمَّ. So the part of the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he took his tongue, and as I referring to his tongue, and said, control this, keep it under control. And the Shaykh says, does it mean keep it under control all of the time from everything, as in don't talk? It doesn't mean that. What it means is control it and stop it from any evil coming from it. Stop from any evil coming from it. Hold off from the evil that can come out of it or because of it, this tongue. This is what the Shaykh mentions, and it's to do with the evil, holding off that evil that can come from the tongue, that can be born from the tongue, and what can be said on the tongue. So then the Shaykh mentions this here, and he says, so if the person, he holds and controls his tongue from any evil occurring, then likewise the limbs will also the limbs will therefore be spared as well. Why? Because the Shaykh, he mentions the hadith that we'll talk about inshallah as we go along in this lesson. And he mentions it here as is relevant. So the Shaykh, he says, he mentions this hadith that we read, says, indeed the members, all of them, i.e. the limbs, they humble the tongue, and they say, fear Allah, for indeed we are with you, as in whatever you do, we're gonna end up following. So if you are upright, i.e. if the tongue is upright, then we will be upright because of that. And if you become crooked, then we will become crooked because of you. And so this is the proof that the tongue is the most dangerous thing, smallest piece of flesh, and one of the most dangerous things that we have. Because if as in this hadith, if you say something wrong or you start falling into haram because of it, one thing leads to another, and then the limbs take over, as we learned from this hadith here. So it's important to protect this tongue and keep it under control, because if we keep it under control, we're in a good position, inshallah. And the limbs won't fall into error as well. So the tongue needs to be controlled here, and this is what the Shaykh is making his point in this paragraph that we read. So if the tongue is upright, then the rest of the limbs will be upright as well and be rectified. Let's continue. Then point 26, the Shaykh, he says, وَلَهُ وَصَحَّحَهُ عن معاذ رضي الله عنه قلت يا رسول الله وإنا لمؤاخذون بما نتكلم به قال ثكلتك أمك يا معاذ وهل يكب الناس على وجوههم أو قال على مناخرهم إلا حصائد ألسنتهم. So in this hadith here, then it's on the authority of Mu'adh, may Allah be pleased with him, and he said, I said, O Messenger of Allah, will we be held accountable by that which we say? As in, are we held accountable for what we say? And he said, Thakilatka ummuk, Ya Mu'adh, and the original meaning here, thaqilatka ummuk, is like you lost or you'll die, you die, or you've been lost, yeah, or someone's lost you, or someone dies. It's not used like that. It's more in this context. It's being used by the Prophet ﷺ because of amazement, yeah, being amazed by the question that he was just asked, being amazed, uh, so in amazement and shock, and then the Prophet ﷺ says to Mu'adh, he says, and are the people dragged upon their faces, dragged upon their faces, or upon their nostrils, except, i.e. being punished, except by what they've earned by their tongues. Yeah. So the Shaykh, let's read the Shaykh's explanation. Then the Shaykh, he goes on to say, قال وله أي الترمذي رحمه الله وصححه عن معاذ أي ابن جبل رضي الله عنه قال قلت يا رسول الله وإنا لمؤاخذون بما نتكلم به. هذا سؤال من معاذ رضي الله عنه على إثر بيان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم له بإذن شأن اللسان بعد جملة من الوصايا. قال له عليه الصلاة والسلام ألا أخبرك بملاك ذلك كله؟ قلت بلى يا رسول الله. قال كف عليك هذا مثل ما تقدم معنا في حديث سفيان. كف عليك هذا وأخذ بلسان نفسه. So here the Shaykh he mentions some benefits as well. He says walahu, and what does walahu mean here? Where we read from the hadith, it means Tirmidhi, may Allah have mercy upon him, yeah, with regards to the hadith in his compilation. Then wasahahu, i is sahih, yeah, authenticated on the authority of Mu'adh, Mu'adh ibn Jabal, may Allah be pleased with him. And I won't read this part because we already read in the part of the hadith. The Shaykh says this question from Mu'adh, may Allah be pleased with him, it shows us that is asking for clarification, and it shows us also, like the answer, when we see what the Prophet says regarding the answer, it shows us also and demonstrates to us the affair, the great affair of the tongue, that it can land us in a lot of hot water if we don't control it. And the Shaykh mentions that this was mentioned after some advice I was given by the Prophet ﷺ. And similarly what we read in the previous paragraph about where the Prophet ﷺ said control this, as in control the tongue, yeah, as we read in the previous paragraph. So the Shaykh mentions this. Let's continue. فقلت يا رسول الله أو إنا لمؤاخذون بما نتكلم به، وهذا يفسر قوله كف عليك هذا، أي عن الشيء الذي تؤاخذ عليه يعاقبك الله سبحانه وتعالى عليه، الكلام المحرم، الكلام الباطل، كف عليك هذا. قال وإنا لمؤاخذون بما نتكلم به. قال ثقلتك أمك يا معاذ. معنى ثقلتك أمك أي فقدتك أي بالموت. هذا ظاهر الحديث، لكن الكلمة ولها نظائر جر استعمال العرب لها، ولا يقصدون الدعاء على الشخص. والنبي عليه الصلاة والسلام لما قال ثقلتك أمك يا معاذ لم يقصد الدعاء عليه. ولما يقول عليه الصلاة والسلام تربت يداك، وهذا معناه الدعاء بالفقر، ليس مقصودا بالدعاء، وإنما يجري على اللسان في مقام مثلا التعجب. وهنا يتعجب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من غفلة معاذ رضي الله عنه عن هذا الأمر وخطورة هذا اللسان. Okay, so let's go through what the Shaykh said here, and this clarifies everything I said earlier, and actually clarifies everything, and I'll clarify a point as well where I think I didn't explain it properly. So let's go through this. So then the Shaykh mentions the part of the hadith where Mu'adh said, I said, O Messenger, is it are we accountable for what we say, as in when we use this tongue? um, and the Shaykh says this explains the previous hadith, and what part of the hadith where it said kufa alayka hada, as in where the Prophet ﷺ, took his tongue and said to the other Sahabi in the previous hadith, kufa alayka hada, and also in the same hadith, part of the same hadith as well that we're reading right now, of some wasaya advice that was given. So the tongue, so hold this from saying evil, basically, as we mentioned and we've come across. And the Shaykh says that one will be accounted and be punished, and is punishable by what he says upon his tongue. So for example, falling into haram or falsehood, saying falsehood by way of his tongue. So then the Shaykh goes on to say, what is thaqilatka ummuk ya Muaz? So the Shaykh explains it better than I did, so it's good. Let's go through this and correct that as well, inshallah. So the Shaykh says, ma'na thaqilatka ummuk, it means like I lost you, and I lost you, I by way of death, or by death, I've lost you. That's what it actually means. That's its apparent meaning. However, the Shaykh says this word, it has different use cases and different meanings by way of how the Arabs use this phrase, and so they don't mean this dua upon the person as in, in this way, or the way the Prophet ﷺ said it. Rather, it's more to do with shock and amazement, as is being used in this context here, with that meaning, shock and amazement. Likewise, similarly, you may come across, for example, the phrase dua taribat yadak, and it means, the Shaykh says, he gives another example, taribat yadak, and it means may your hands perish, and it literally means may your hands perish, but its meaning, and the apparent meaning, is a dua against a person, hoping for poverty for them, but it's not used in its apparent meaning. It's used in when you're amazed. When one says that it's in amazement, it's being used in that way. Yeah. So this is what the Shaykh clarifies for us, and because the Prophet ﷺ was amazed. What was he amazed by? He was amazed that Muaz radiallahu anhu wasn't aware of the grave dangers of the tongue. That's what shocked him, and that's why he used that phrase. Let's continue. Alright, okay, we'll finish here at the red line, so we've got another maybe 5-10 minutes and then we'll wrap up, inshallah. Okay, where was I? Okay, there, here we go. قال ثكلتك أمك يا معاذ وهل يكب الناس على وجوههم أو قال على مناخرهم إلا حصائد ألسنتهم وهذا فيه أن اللسان من أعظم أسباب دخول النار وسبحان الله من يتأمل يجد أن جل المعاصي وأكثرها من ورائها اللسان يبدأ اللسان يتكلم ثم تأتي المعصية بعد ذلك من زنا وفواحش ومحرمات إلى غير ذلك. أول ما تكون البداية اللسان ثم تتبعه الجوارح فإذا صان الإنسان لسانه سلم مما وراء ذلك من فواحش وأمور حرمها الله سبحانه وتعالى. So then in this paragraph the Shaykh, he goes on to say and explain the last part, that the people are not the people thrown on their and dragged on their faces or upon their nostrils, except because of what their tongues have earned and said, as it said, and then ultimately earned what they earned with their tongues of what they said. And the Shaykh says in this is that shows us that the tongue, it's from the greatest reasons of entering the hellfire. And the Shaykh says subhanallah in amazement. And the Shaykh says whoever ponders over this finds and learns that most if not the vast or most of the sins, so he says most of the sins and errors and the disobediences that are related to it are what's behind it is the tongue. The tongue's behind it. The tongue gets people into trouble easily, and for a lot of these sins, many of them, as the Shaykh mentioned. And so, for example, the Shaykh, he says the person he'll start off with the tongue saying things that are wrong, and then, for example, he'll say things that are wrong, and then it'll lead to, for example, acts of fornication, which are then performed by the limbs. So the tongue starts it off, and then it ends with the limbs, for example, and other than that. So the beginning is the tongue, and the end is the limbs that follow, as the Shaykh mentioned the hadith in one of the previous paragraphs on the first page that we were reading. So whoever preserves the tongue, then is secure from from any of these mistakes, because if you can control his tongue, then the limbs won't take part in anything else. It stops right at the tongue. It doesn't go beyond anywhere. It doesn't go anywhere. So this is the thing, and the person stays away from the what Allah has forbidden. Then we go on to the hadith that the Shaykh mentioned earlier, and he said he would explain in more detail here. So this is the last one we will probably be talking about today, inshallah. So 27. وله عن أبي سعيد رضي الله عنه مرفوعا إذا أصبح ابن آدم فإن الأعضاء كلها تكفر اللسان تقول اتق الله فينا فإنما نحن بك إن استقمت استقمنا وإن اعوججت اعوججنا. قوله تكفر أي تذل وتخضع. So then we read this hadith earlier, but let's go through it now. So on the authority of Abi Sa'id, may Allah be pleased with him, related from the Prophet ﷺ that the Prophet ﷺ said, if Ibn Adam, if the son of Adam enters the morning, or wakes up, enters the morning, for example, Asbaha Ibn Adam, he says, for indeed, so when the first part of the morning, when the person wakes up in the morning, for example, the body parts, the limbs, all of them, they humble the tongue. They say to the tongue, fear Allah for us, for us, or because of us, because they know what's going to happen. They know, as we've learned as well. They say, fear Allah, for indeed we are connected to you. So we are connected to you, we are linked to you, right? We're with you. So if you, i.e. the tongue, is upright, then we the limbs are upright, and if you, the tongue, is crooked, then we will end up being crooked. And the Shaykh explained this before, and the Shaykh says, what does tukaffir mean here? Tukaffir al-lisan. It means here to humble. So the limbs are humbling the tongue to stop it from falling into errors, because if it does, it will drag the limbs with it, basically. So let's continue. Let's see what the Shaykh says here. قال وله أي الترمذي عن أبي سعيد رضي الله عنه مرفوعا إذا أصبح ابن آدم هذا يكون في كل صباح فإن الأعضاء كلها أي جوارح الإنسان جميعها اليد والقدم والأذن وغير ذلك. So the Shaykh says here, وله, referring back to At-Tirmidhi, the hadith from quote from Tirmidhi, on the authority of Abi Sa'id, may Allah be pleased with him, marfu'un, related directly from the Prophet, that إذا أصبح ابن آدم. So the Shaykh explained it here actually. So he says هذا يكون في كل صباح. So it means every morning. So every morning those limbs say to the tongue. And the Shaykh says, what does Allah mean? Like as in the members of your body, the limbs of your body, all of the limbs, the hands, the feet, the ears, and other than that. So the Shaykh continues, he says, فإن الأعضاء كلها تكفر اللسان. ما معنى تكفر اللسان؟ قال تذل وتخضع كل صباح تؤلن الجوارح للسان بأنها تابعة له وأن الشيء الذي يكون عليه اللسان يكون على الجوارح. تكفر اللسان أي تخطئ وتذله، تقول نحن تبعا لك. الشيء الذي تكون عليه الجوارح. So then the Shaykh continues and he says, so the tongues, the limbs, they humble the tongue and they say, we are with you and we are connected to you. So they humble the tongue, they warn the tongue, they warn it from falling into sin, because if it does, they will inadvertently end up falling into it as well. They're connected to, as the Shaykh explained earlier as well. So this was being said here. Then the Shaykh continues and he says, تكفر اللسان تقول اتق الله فينا فإنما نحن بك. يد الإنسان قدمه أذنه فرجه إلى غير ذلك من أعضائه وجوارحه كلها. تكفر اللسان تقول اتق الله فينا فإنما نحن بك. فإن استقمت استقمنا وإن اعوججت اعوججنا. وهذا فيه أن اللسان أمير للبدن وأعضاء الإنسان كلها تابعة له. فإن استقام اللسان استقام البدن وإن اعوج اللسان اعوج البدن. وهذا يدل على خطورة اللسان، كما أن الحديث الذي تقدم معنا ألا وإن في الجسد مضغة إذا صلحت صلح الجسد كله وإذا فسدت فسد الجسد كله ألا وهي القلب، يدل على خطورة القلب. So then in this paragraph the Shaykh he explains regarding the tongue, and he explains to us as well that the limbs, they say to the tongue every morning, they say to the tongue, they say to it, fear Allah in us, for indeed we are with you, as in we are connected to you. These limbs, all the body parts, they are connected to the tongue. And so the Shaykh, as he mentioned, so towards the end of the hadith, what do the limbs say? They say, if you are upright, then we will be upright, and if you become crooked and go the wrong way, then we will be inadvertently will follow along. Why? Because the limbs are connected and they follow along, as the Shaykh mentioned earlier in the lesson. And so this tells us as well, the Shaykh says, this shows us clearly the dangers of the tongue, how dangerous this tongue is. Because of it, you could end up in the hellfire. And also, in previous lessons that we covered, we did cover this hadith, and the Shaykh reminds us as well the other hadith here where we read, and the Shaykh explained this to us in previous lessons. I'll highlight it here, that where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, shall I inform you, of a small morsel of flesh, if it is upright, the rest of the body, all of it will be upright, and if it is corrupted, then the rest of the body will be corrupted. And he said, it is what? It is the heart. It is the heart. And remember, one step before the tongue is the heart. And so the beginning point is there, and it quickly goes to the tongue. And so this shows us also the danger of the heart. So there's two small pieces of flesh, the tongue and the heart, extremely dangerous if not nurtured and looked after, especially the heart, because that's initially the starting point, and the tongue is not far after, is it? So then the Shaykh mentions this, and he goes on to say in the last paragraph, and this is where we will stop, so we're on the last paragraph here. وَالْحَدِيثَانِ مَعًا يدلان على أن المرء بأسوريه وقد جمع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في الدعاء ما يشمل الأمرين في قوله اللهم إني أسألك قلبا سليما ولسانا صادقا. وهذه دعوة عظيمة جدا في إصلاح هذين الأسورين، القلب واللسان. اللهم إني أسألك قلبا سليما ولسانا صادقا. فإذا وفق العبد لسلامة القلب وصدق اللسان صلحت الجوارح كلها بإذن الله تبارك وتعالى. So then the Shaykh, he wraps up here, and so we will do the same as well. For this section at least we'll stop here. The Shaykh says these two hadith, they demonstrate and they show us that in the person, these two small pieces of flesh, the heart and the tongue, it shows how dangerous these two are. And in the dua of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that we read, and I'll just highlight again here just in case if you want to have a look again if you can't see clearly because it's all white and black text here. Allahumma inni as'aluka qalban saliman wa lisanan sadiqan. So you're asking Allah, you're saying, oh Allah, where the Prophet says, oh Allah, I ask for a clean heart of any errors that holds any kind of those diseases that the Shaykh talked about in previous lessons and even up until now, and a tongue that is truthful. So a clean, clear heart and a truthful tongue. And this is, the Shaykh says, this is a magnificent supplication, a very magnificent supplication in relation to rectifying these two small pieces of flesh, the heart and the tongue. And so the Shaykh mentions the dua again. And so if these two are rectified, then the servant of Allah is given success. Because the ultimately the limbs or the body parts will also be upright in the end because of these two being upright, the two in the chain, the first two, the heart and the tongue. Then obviously follows the body parts. So the Shaykh finishes there on that paragraph, and we'll just stop here and continue next week from the red highlighted text. Barakallahu feekum. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك وأتوب إليك وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.